Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Politdigm Podcast. My name is Red, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Alpha.
I have somehow been able to keep existing.
And today we're back with another episode of the Politdigm Podcast. As I said in the beginning, I don't know why I'm repeating myself. Today is the 23rd of January, and this week's blog has been brought by me. It's a me week, which means that you get to experience a whole hour of my crazed rambles. So that's going to be
Not
fun.
on contract.
So yeah, this week is my week. Next week is also my week. Alpha asked me to cover 2 weeks, so I'm working on some exciting stuff. Yeah, we have a very interesting article for you to talk about today. But before I do so, also, don't forget that if you do enjoy our content, that you can support us over on Patreon. If you can't support us through Patreon, you can also check out our website, either in the link below if you're on YouTube or if you are on Spotify or another platform. A little harder, but go to Google, search up Politdigm, you'll find our website or something else, which we'll be able to link to our website. Yeah, you'll figure it out, unless you're like, I don't know, you've lived under a rock and you're like 75 years old and use like a Nokia brick phone and I don't know how to do anything. This was a weird diss to like one person on earth. Anyways, if you want to support us through other means, you can do it there. Check out how you can help us out in ways that don't involve money, which in most ways, I'll be honest, is much more helpful than helping us through money. So
There are two types of people. I just went for the money. I'm so sorry.
So also, you can also join our Discord server where if you do end up supporting us on Patreon, you get access to some special perks. And one of those perks is being able to submit questions to the podcast Q&A, where each week at the end of each episode, we try to answer your questions. Of course, you can also follow us over on our social media platforms like Threads or Instagram or any other that I can't really remember. I think those are really the only two. I mean, we're also on Facebook, but like, I've never
on
said that before.
Facebook?
Yeah, we post stuff on Facebook. Did you know
Why
that?
the fuck are we on Facebook?
I don't know, man. It's like easy. It's like I just have to like click a button on like the Meta business suite thing where I like schedule all the posts for Politdigm, and it's just like, do you also want to post for Facebook? And I'm like, fuck it, sure, why not? It's like one button, so I'm like, if
I did not know about this.
yeah, but we also have Facebook. And also, don't forget to check out our main channel. We've been doing a series over there called Politdigm Reads, where I myself have been reading books. As of this week, we are starting a new series or a new season, whatever you want to call it, which is basically means that I'm starting a new book. Previously, we read the Communist Manifesto. I did an amazing episode last week where I went into the manifesto and did a bit of a conclusion and kind of talked about it and, kind of did a bit of a analysis of the book. And this week I am starting with a new book called Techno-Feudalism about the idea that capitalism has been killed. So go check that out. Well, of course, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, when it comes out, you'll have to wait 2 days, but yeah, you'll manage. And with that being said, yeah, let's actually get into the article. So, Alpha, you haven't read the article because
I have not.
you've been busy, but
I have not, but I have not read the article.
because of that, I'm going to make you some questions, right? I'm going to turn this into a bit of an interactive situation, right? So,
Okay. Will I get cancelled for my genuine answers?
I hope not. I really do hope not. So,
Okay, hit me.
the question which I pose in this article is it possible to achieve socialism without resorting to a violent revolution?
Okay.
Now, what in your first thoughts, right? Like without even hearing what I'm going to say next, what would you say is your answer?
Yes, it is possible to achieve socialism without a violent revolution.
Right. That is a fair assessment and also my first assessment before writing this article. And
Your
whilst
assessment change.
my assessment changed, and you're going to see why, and it's not for a bad reason, but you'll understand it. Okay, you'll understand my point.
Oh no, okay, just
So-
keep going.
Before we go any further, it is very important to say this, that us at Politdigm, we do not like violence. We do not like it. It is something that we constantly talk about and we constantly, reflect on. We did it in the last few weeks with, like, example, talking about guns and how talking about gun violence is something that we are very passionate about. We have talked about the violence currently going on in Palestine, how people are, being killed every
I
day.
still have not recovered from writing those blogs.
So violence is something that we see as something just bad. Like, unfortunately, it is something that is not great. You should never have to resort to violence, and no good conflict is really ever resorted through violence. However, there are nuances to this, because there are two different types of violent conflicts. There are those which are a reactionary violence, right? The idea of, like, oh, this is bad, I'm going to kill you. That's not bad. However, if we think of it in a different situation, like, oh, this is bad, I'm going to, like, you're a bad person, I'm going to kill you, and you have seemingly done nothing wrong. This person is, for example, let's say, a massive racist, and you are a person of color. And you're like, whoa, why, you want to kill me because I'm a person of color? And you, whilst protecting yourself, enact violence on the other person. Does this resolve the issue at hand? Not really. It's not resolving the underlying pillars of the conflict, but it is a act of self. What's it called? Why can't I remember the term?
Got it.
Self-protection, self-defense. That's the word. Jesus, what the hell?
Self-protection.
Took me a second there. So I wrote this article because, as I've, in the last couple of weeks, been further, developing my knowledge around Marxism, which is, generally speaking, the ideology that we at Politdigm have. I've been kind of coming to a consistent conclusion, which is that clearly shit is going to go down in a very shitty way to put it, but that that in a Marxist vision of the world, that to achieve socialism, right, which is the opposite, not the opposite, or the next step after capitalism, that there needs to be a sort of proletariat or proletarian revolution. So what is a proletarian revolution? A proletarian revolution is something that is very basic, something that is talked about in the manifesto, which is that there is a society where there are two classes. There's a class struggle. In fact, one of the most famous lines from the Communist Manifesto is that all hitherto history can be explained with class struggle. Well, what that means is that
based.
Yeah, which means that throughout history, when you do a historical, materialist analysis of the world, you come to the conclusion that almost every, if not every, situation that or issue that is, that happens in life, every struggle, every whatever you want to put it, that it has been. That originates when there is a conflict between two classes. And of course, this has happened since there has been classes, which throughout the majority of the history of Homo sapiens was not the case. We are around 300,000 years old, and class society is a relatively recent thing, when you put it in a big scale. So generally speaking, for a long time, we didn't have these issues. But ever since there has been class struggle, everything has been going to shit. And of course, whilst a lot of the issues we have under capitalism were not originated through capitalism, these were issues which have existed, throughout, the slave societies, like the Romans or the Greeks, where basically labor was done through slavery. Then we have the feudalism, which is essentially the system afterwards, which was the dominant system for around 1,000 years in Europe. And then we have capitalism right over, and these issues just kind of carried on from each situation or each system, and have morphed, have evolved into different things, but capitalism preserved them. So it is still an issue of capitalism. Of course, Marxists, or Marx himself, was not a big fan of this. He didn't really fuck with capitalism. Originally,
You don't say.
again, I'm kind of spoiling the episode I did on the conclusion of the Communist Manifesto, but if you do listen to that episode, you'll find out that Marx really liked the phrase of the French Revolution, which Alpha you'll say for me because you'll actually say it correctly.
Shit, you want me to say in French?
No, not in
or-
French. Say it in English, for the love of fuck.
So it's liberty, equality, fraternity.
Exactly. Those are, in all respects, very noble causes. And those were the ideals on which capitalism was built. However, that is a lie. Capitalism does not have
Yeah, I was
those
about
things.
to say, wait, what?
Capitalism
Excuse me?
does not have those things. And it was exactly because of that. It was Marx looking at their ideals and then comparing them to capitalism and going, yeah, but those things aren't happening. Those things aren't existing. What is the cause? There clearly needs to be something that's making it so that capitalism can't have these things on which it was built. Many years on, he did a bunch of studying, and he came to the conclusion that there's nothing stopping capitalism from having these things. Capitalism is the problem, right? So when he does that, he realizes, okay, capitalism is the problem. You have the capitalist class known as the bourgeoisie. Nowadays, people don't go out and talk about the bourgeoisie, but that is technically
CEO.
speaking, that is the political correct terminology. But saying the capitalist class is equally as correct. It doesn't matter. But for the sake of the argument, we're going to talk about the bourgeoisie and the proletariat throughout the entire episode, because that's how I wrote it in the article, and that's how I'm going to talk about it. So we have the bourgeoisie and we have the proletariat. The proletariat is the working class. And something that is very important in Marxism is the idea of dialectical materialism. I'm not going to explain what it is today here. If you don't know what it is, go watch other videos on it, or even watch the video I did on the Communist Manifesto. But all you need to know is that they explain that almost the entirety of the existence of the universe, not just in society, that there's always two forces which go against each other, but they are codependent. It's like yin and yang, basically, if you want to put it in simple terms that most people know, which is that together they're one thing, but they're separate, but they're inside of them. There's two contrary things which clash, which can't exist, but also need each other to exist. So the bourgeoisie and the proletariat is the exact same thing. The bourgeoisie only exists as long as the proletariat works for them and allows them to exist. And the proletariat only appeared because the bourgeoisie came to power and made it and created essentially the proletarian class. So what then is the proletarian revolution? The proletarian revolution, simply put, is that the proletarians are like, hey, we're overworked. We, work horrendous hours in horrendous conditions. And at the end of the month, week, day, whatever, we are not getting our wage is not reflecting our work, is not reflecting how the value we are putting into the company or society in general. And the proletarian revolution is when the proletariat finally goes, we are sick of this shit, and we want a system that puts the proletariat in the makes the proletariat into the dominant class, and takes the bourgeoisie and makes it the non-dominant class. That is the Marxist understanding of it. Of course, we have, for example, Lenin's understanding of it, which is that he believed that to achieve a proletarian revolution, or after the proletarian revolution, that it needs to be something known as the what's it called, the dictatorship of the proletariat. That is basically the difference between Leninism and Marxism. I don't particularly agree with it, but that's not the point of the article. So that is what the proletarian revolution is. It is simply a revolution which wants to overthrow capitalism, get rid of capitalism, create socialism, and after that's after the revolution. Then we have, when we look at the proletarian revolution, it is something that's important to understand, which is the difference between the abolition of capitalism and reforming capitalism. A lot of the people which go, we do not need a revolution of the proletariat, are usually people who want to reform capitalism. Who are these people? These are people like social democrats, for example. Like a lot of, like, for example, Bernie Sanders, in a way, is a reformist. He believes that through voting, through the power of just doing voting, essentially, there's not much more power that you have. You can essentially turn capitalism into socialism. Whilst in a way that is a noble. That is a noble idea, a noble cause. It is questionable if that works, because throughout the years we've seen that when you try to reform capitalism, you achieve then social democracies, which kind of are in between, which have, they have very strong social networks. They have, like great education, great healthcare, et cetera, but then you still clearly have the capitalist traits. And in many ways, to me and most people, the issue with social democracies is then that instead of fixing the underlying problems with capitalism, you make a bunch of like infrastructure, which is seemingly socialist in nature. Doesn't mean that they're literally socialist, because they aren't. They are, social safety nets, which essentially act as a bit of a band-aid on the issues of capitalism. And generally speaking, if you aren't in a recession, if capitalism is not in its its destructive states, which is very frequently, everything seems fine. But then anytime a recession happens, shit starts going south, which is what's currently going on in almost every social democracy, is that they're noticing, oh shit, yeah, we're having financial issues, because the issue is not, is capitalism at the end of the day. The abolitionist views of towards capitalism is that capitalism is a flawed system. You need to get rid of it. It's shit. It should go away. They believe that, simply voting it out is not as simple as that. Whilst hypothetically speaking, you can do a revolution and then go, we are forcing you to establish, for example, elections, and then the entire population votes on a socialist government, and then they do socialism, or whatever that you would consider it. Is, yes, technically voting it in, but it is different, because you're doing it in a revolutionary state already, and you're essentially doing it with the pretense of abolishing capitalism anyway. So it's kind of not really. It's more of like a mild version of it. At that point, having voting in that scenario is more of like we're doing this under democracy rather than doing this in a forced manner, right? Which is more of like in my opinion, more of like an aesthetic thing to do rather than an actual meaningful thing to do, because what is important is the afterwards, not really that, oh yeah, we did vote. It's like, okay, whatever, sure. I mean, the opposite has happened in, for example, where there's clearly socialist countries would then, have a coup, right? A military coup, and they, supposedly have an election, and suddenly a right wing, fascist dictator comes into power. But at that point, it's like, why? Just, we knew this was going to happen, so that voting doesn't really mean much. But yeah, that is,
We have our own example in our own history with that.
yeah, we do. That's true. In both sides, technically, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that because we're fucking dumbasses. We elected a dictator, basically, or we elected the means for the dictator to come to power. And then,
Yeah,
seeing as though the elections were all rigged, we never could do anything until we had an armed revolt where no one died,
yeah. But no,
except
the
three
reason I
guys that got
was
fired upon by the secret police.
the reason I was asking that is because then, by the end of our, I mean, I could call it revolution, right? We like do like forced elections or whatever, or like demand elections.
I do not know. I do know that later that year or later next year, on the 25th of November, there was basically a coup
Yeah,
made by the armed forces to keep our country from going towards
communism.
no, not communism, like left-leaning dictatorship.
Ah, yeah,
Think of Venezuela,
true. Okay, and okay,
which is not
understandable.
good.
So there's that. There needs to be, during this conversation, there needs to be a clear understanding of reforming capitalism and abolishing capitalism. And, over at Politdigm, we have made it quite clear that we're pretty strong on the idea of just getting rid of capitalism as a whole, because whilst there never, it obviously needs to be a transition from capitalism to socialism, it can't be as gradual as like, oh, we'll do a little thing here, then we'll do a little thing over there, and then
And a little
this and
salt,
that.
a little pepper.
Because the reality is that in most cases it kind of stagnates, and it just kind of stays in like one fixed state, where then it doesn't evolve because people are seemingly kind of happy with the current state of a social democracy. And the issue is that a social democracy is still capitalism. And the reason why social democracies usually don't then evolve into socialism is because they have no incentive to do so, because they're being incentivized, by
Got it.
capitalism themselves, right? So there's like a financial reason to not go any further, because seemingly they're already in a perfect state. It's hard to explain. At least that's not the point of this article, anyways. Then we have to get into what is the bourgeois violence. So,
Who are the cunts?
as we said, the bourgeoisie is the capitalist class, and we can question, which is that, okay, so we're thinking, okay, there's a revolution, but does that revolution need to get violent? Why is it getting violent? And this is where the bourgeois violence question starts coming into question, which is, you could ask,
The question comes into question.
is the bourgeoisie inherently violent? Is it, holy shit, I'm going to sneeze.
Evil. The bourgeoisie inherently evil. I think
It's
they
like,
might.
is it a guaranteed thing that they are going to do violence? It's a reasonable question. And does that mean that, is it like in succession to that question, if yes, if they are inherently going to act violently, wouldn't that mean that even if you don't want to have a violent revolution, you're going to have one because there's no other way, because you're going to have to protect yourself, you're going to have to do self-defense? It's that's where I was trying to get at this topic in the article. And of course, while there is no like written law, it's not in the laws of physics that says, hey, yeah, the bourgeoisie are going to be a bunch of assholes. We must
It is
look,
law of physics. It's just
we,
how much of an asshole they're going to be.
And also, I'm sure that like people could be like, no, like in the way that the capitalist class has been designed, they're inherently violent. Like it's like it is a written law. I think that it's a bit of like it's kind of semantics, right? I don't think it matters because at the end of the day, I agree that the bourgeoisie is kind of violent, not because I don't know how to put it, but what matters is
I
that
mean, when you build your empire of riches and fortune on the backs of the common day people and fucking oppress them whenever they try to get minimum wage, yeah, I think they're inherently violent.
yeah, I think yeah, I guess yeah, that's true. I didn't really know how to word it, but yeah, that's true. But the whole point of this part of the article is that I'm trying to say is that when you look at the constant behavior of the bourgeoisie and you recognize that, for example, police and the military essentially only exist to protect private property. We talked this in the last episode, and if you want, you can go back. But I said this because I was already had written this article when that episode came out, and so I was already had this in my mind, which is that, for example, in the United States, the police and the military, they function as the protectors, the bodyguards, whatever you want to put it, of the capitalist class per private property. That
I
is their
agree with
function.
you. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to tell you. There's a big caveat, which is they function as basically the enforcers of the bourgeoisie class in a capitalist system.
Yeah, like and I had a conversation with a friend the other day about this because I also gave them the article to read a bit earlier, and I was kind of commenting the article with them, and they brought something up which was the idea that like, oh yeah, but like laws aren't like designed, for example, to like laws are designed for the people, and I honestly don't agree, for a simple reason is that in bourgeois society where the bourgeois rules, where the bourgeois in a lot of countries like the United States, most government people, most politicians are either part of the bourgeois themselves or are work at the behest of the bourgeoisie, sorry. You essentially come to the realization that in the entirety of life has been designed to protect the bourgeoisie, and everything, and they hold all the cards, and everything is in their favor. And this is something that's very important because, for example, you can look at you can, for example, like socialism because socialism is not a monolithic concept. Socialism is a fluid thing, and there's many forms of socialism. But let's say we're talking about a socialism that has private ownership, which is the case of China, for example. The way they have designed, or the hierarchy in their society, is that at the top there's the government. Then underneath the government is privately owned capital, privately owned companies, and publicly owned companies. And then under that is the workers, which means that regardless, it is the government who controls the companies or the enterprises, regardless if they are private or public, and then it's those which control the workers. In the US, it's different. First, we have the private ownership. We have the enterprises. They're at the top of the food chain. They're the ones who control everything. Then under them is the government. And then under the government is the people. This is a very important concept to understand because in this state, we show that, oh shit, wait, who is at the top then? Was it the private ownerships? Wait, who are those again? Oh, right, that's the capitalist class. Oh shit, that's the bourgeoisie. Oh, fuck. Right, so yeah, the entirety of capitalist society has been developed around them. So when all the odds are against you, and, the bourgeois has essentially armed themselves against you, you start coming to the conclusion that, okay, shit is going to get nasty. And then we don't even have to look at revolutions. Let's look at, for example, one of the earliest articles or the first article that Alpha wrote for Politdigm, which was the stuff going on in France at the time. And we
Yeah.
see they're a perfect example, the capitalist country themselves, the birthplace of capitalism, essentially, showing off that in a relatively minor situation, or even when there was what's it called, like the strikes and the marches against
Yeah, I know
when
exactly what you
they were
mean.
putting up the retirement age,
Yes.
where France mobilized, like they mobilized against the government, and the government started acting on violence. And let's think about that. We're not talking, and I even remember when I was watching the news and was watching the violence going on during that situation, I thought surely something really big has happened. And whilst the making the retirement age higher is very important for several reasons, in my mind that did not justify the level of violence that was going on. I thought that surely Macron had fucking, I don't know, said that he was going to blow up France. I don't know.
Call him McCohen.
Macron, fucking, I don't know. I got a little
McCohen.
French there. And I got so hyped up that I hit my bottle and it fell.
I heard that. Also,
Yes.
I don't know about France being the birthplace of capitalism, but I do think
I
you
mean,
dominate that topic better than me.
they
They're the
the French
birthplace of slavery.
Revolution was the feudalist class, was a revolution of the capitalist class, of the bourgeoisie, towards the feudalist class. It's kind of the opposite. It's like at some point, which is very hypocritical and so fucking weird, which is that at some point capitalists were at the position that proletarians are today in relation to another class, but then they kind of betrayed themselves and became the thing that they essentially hated. And so France, the French Revolution was the bourgeoisie basically going, "Hey, feudalists, go fuck yourselves." And that's, I said that, like, is France the birthplace of capitalism formally? Probably not, but
Okay,
that was a
I am
big
so sorry,
that's a
viewers.
that's a
One
big part
second.
of like of their whole thing. That's like a
What
big
are you
thing of it.
talking? What do you think? Why do you think the French Revolution happened? You're either
But
telling your point very badly, or I am misunderstanding, like on another level.
the bourgeoisie at its origin, it was essentially the people, the operators of companies, of factories, right? These were the people who owned factories and those who wanted to not be
Wait,
oppressed
no, wait.
by
What?
oppressed
You,
by the king, right? And essentially at that time, the workers themselves saw themselves as being part of the bourgeoisie at some point, right? Because they wanted to be on the side of the factory owners rather than the king, right?
okay, so basically, the bourgeoisie is what we call middle class. They were business owners, but like wealthy business owners. It's the highest you can go in a society without being part of the court. Basically, you can be a merchant and be part of the bourgeoisie.
Yeah,
Now,
at the
I I,
time.
I do not think those were the guys that started it. I am pretty fucking sure it was not those guys that started it.
It was a big part of it, though. Like it wasn't who started it, but a big thing, the big idea behind the French Revolution was get rid of the feudalists and establish liberalism or capitalism, right?
What?
And at some
I am
point,
so I am so confused. You managed to break my brain on something that I thought I knew.
like, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, it was the factory owners which started the revolution. No, but it was in their interest, of course. And they, of course, were part of the revolution. And the big solution after the revolution was to make the factory owners and all those people the ruling class, because that was seen as the logical step at that time. Does that
But
make sense?
badly.
All right, whatever. Moving on.
You broke my brain on the French Revolution. What the
So
fuck?
when we going back to what I was saying, modern day France, right? When we look at these seemingly, if we compare them to the idea of a proletarian revolution, people going to the streets to protest about, you know,
Shit.
making the retirement age higher, one is clearly a bigger thing than the other, right? A proletarian revolution is a much bigger thing. That's a huge revolution compared to a lot of people are upset, for good reasons, and they are right to be upset. And in that relatively small thing compared to a proletarian revolution, if the bourgeoisie, if the capitalist class act in such a violent way, what will they do during a proletarian revolution? They will act in their full force, because instead of going, oh, they're trying to make our lives a little harder. They're like, oh, they're trying to get rid of us. They're trying to get rid of us for real this time. Like, it's happening. Oh, fuck, we need to mobilize all our power. And that is not a good thing. That is literally, at some point, like, and I think you also know about this, the whole joke about how anytime any socialist country pops up in the world, that the US just fucking destroys them, right? And that is
Lies, psyops.
That is a psyop. Don't read the peep, dude.
All psyops.
So that is a relatively small example, right? What happens, saying that the US is the capitalist class is not a good example, but we can draw comparisons, right? Like the idea that, oh, we had clearly a socialist movement, right? A proletarian movement, and then we have a bourgeois power, a capitalist power, and they just destroy the socialist movement without any mercy. And so that really shows that, okay, the bourgeoisie is very open to being violent as all hell. And, since, maybe in countries that don't have such a large military, maybe this isn't such a such a bad, it won't be as bad. But when we're talking about the US or still most European countries, it is going to be a real big shit show. No other way to put it. It is going to be bad. So before I, kind of taking a break from that concept, because we'll get back to that in a second, let's talk about then socialism's past to showcase where there have been socialist revolutions or proletarian revolutions. So there's multiple, but there's three bigger ones. These are three big ones, which are the ones which I chose to talk about in this specific article, which is the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Chinese Communist Revolution of 1949, and the Cuban Revolution of 1959. So the Russian Revolution of 1917 is a famous revolution, is known as the October Revolution, if I'm not mistaken. And it's basically when, it's the Bolshevik movement led by Lenin, where they basically went, hey, king or the czar, you're an asshole. In fact, they previously had something known as the Bloody Sunday, where there was a bunch of people protesting in front of the king's palace, and they were being loud and annoying. And the king was like, get rid of them. I want them gone. I'm eating dinner and I want to be in peace. I want to eat in peace. And they slaughtered every single protester. Again, an example of a bourgeois violence towards protesters in its most extreme case. And then eventually, Lenin, started, riling up some people. I don't know the full, I'm not going to be here explaining the full procedure, but eventually the Bolshevik came, there was a violent revolution against the established power, and they won. There was some kind of funkiness, because then I believe that Lenin was kicked out, and then he came back, and then eventually he only founded the USSR in 1923. So there was like a non-Soviet Union period there, where I'm not really sure what happened, but basically those are the years where the Bolsheviks were technically in power, and then later on the USSR came around. So this is an example, right, of there was a violent revolution and then socialism was established. Then we have the Chinese Revolution, which is the leadership of the revolutionaries was Mao Zedong, which is a really funny name to me because Dong, I don't know, man. That was a very childish joke. I'm really sorry for that one. But yeah, Mao is a very prominent, figure in China. China is still a socialist country. They have a communist party. They're not a communist country. Neither was the Soviet Union. They are
Dictatorship, which I think is also fair to say.
they are a not by definition, but they are socialist countries which have a communist party. These are something very important to keep in mind. And one of the the Chinese Revolution was a very violent one, and in fact, one of the known violence that was enacted was that I think was during or after the actual revolution, they basically lined up a shit ton of landlords and just killed them all because they were seen as private landowners. They were seen as parasites. They were seen as awful people which stole money and basically ripped people from their rights to have a home, and they did it while earning money, so they deserve to die. Do I agree with that they deserve to die? No.
Something that is funny to me. You know Dragon Ball, right? The fucking big huge ass anime.
Yeah, how the fuck are you?
This is gonna get into topic. You know one of the bad guys, Frieza, I think that's his name. The one
Yeah,
that's like
Frieza.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that he was designed to try to. His design was inspired on Japanese businessman.
No, I did not
Because
know
the
that.
writer of the manga fucking hates them, or at least hated them. So he wanted his villain to look like businessmen from Japan.
That is
He's pure
low-key funny.
evil. That is hilarious.
Did not know that. That's a really fun fact. But that's an example of violence. Was that a unnecessary violence? Honestly, yeah, I do think it was. I think it was almost like a flex or like a threat towards private ownership, and I don't think that's a very not a very cash money thing to do. Then, of course, we have the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro, which is to some a more known thing because it's a more recent thing. I mean, it happened 10 years after the Chinese Revolution, sorry. But still, it's more recent regardless, which was, Fidel Castro was going to overthrow a U.S.-backed dictator, and there was a whole altercation throughout many years, and it was, I don't know if it was inherently more violent or like objectively more violent than the Russian Revolution or the Chinese Revolution, but in my opinion, I could be wrong. I would love to be corrected on it and educated on it if somebody has empirical evidence that shows otherwise. But in my opinion, it was the most violent of those revolutions. However, one common thing in all these revolutions is that these revolutions weren't violent because the people who started revolution immediately went, we need to start murdering. We need to start murdering as many people as we can to achieve peace. That is not how it happens. Some people are going to make that argument and are going to go, nah, they were violent people in nature and they took everything by force. But you're missing out on the context of what happened before. These were people who were massively oppressed, which were, under horrendous situations in their countries, which, tried everything. That's the whole point. They tried everything. They tried doing it peacefully. Look at the protesters in Russia. They tried to do it peacefully, and then they got massacred. So it is very important to realize that whilst some people, and in many ways I can agree that some of the revolutionary acts that they did could not be justified, as they were unnecessary towards towards their goals. Like the murdering of the landlords is is very unnecessary. It is important to realize that they became violent not because they just wanted to be violent, but because their conditions made it so that that was the only way out, and they were not doing it out of just bloodlust and a love for wanting to cause bloodshed, but rather of we are fucked if we don't do anything, and we must do anything, and we are desperate, and we have to do this. That is something that is very important to keep in mind, and that goes right into the last topic of the article, which is then violence is kind of answering the question of the beginning, which is it possible to achieve socialism without resorting to a violent revolution? The answer is, unfortunately, no. Now, we can look at this in several ways. We can look at this in like an utopian situation. Would it be the perfect scenario where we don't have to resort to violence? Would that be the perfect thing? Absolutely. That is what everybody wants. Of course it is. Nobody wants to resort to violence. If you do, then you need help. And you clearly have some weird, what's the word? Not masochist. Sadist tendencies, right? But that is not the world we live in, and that is not how the relations between classes work. It isn't and has never been that way. And so the answer is, unfortunately, no. We can't do it, not because we want to be violent, but because we must be out of protecting ourselves, out of protecting the entire the entire concept of achieving socialism is not it is not a question of are we going to be violent, is when and how much. Unfortunately, sure, as I said before, there are going to be situations where if there are countries where relatively they're under militarized and there's a ton of people in the socialist movement, and things are done relatively peacefully, in comparison to other situations. Maybe there was like some sort of building that was blown up, and after that was the only violent act there was, or there was an act of violence in the sorts of just kidnapping a bunch of people, which can be deemed violent regardless, right? There's different levels of violence anyways. Like, for example, even Alpha said this in the beginning of the video, of the episode, sorry, where he talked about the revolution we had in Portugal. In some ways, that was still violence. Was that a violence of, are we going to start murdering people? No, there was no deaths, but there was still it wasn't like, we went to knock on their doors. We're like, hey, it would be kind of nice if like you guys did this one thing. No, there was a mobilization of people that, started doing kind of radical stuff, did radical cool shit. And eventually were able to get rid of the dictator. So there's different levels of violence. And when you start taking into account that we are in a situation in life where we are the most armed we have ever been, where we are in many situations or the most reactionary we have ever been in a long time. You can, learn about this in previous episodes, like the rise of right-wing ideologies and stuff like that, where it's clear that throughout time we have slowly kind of been becoming more reactionary, more right-wing because of the lack of education and on all these different complex issues. And when you look at that, you start going, all right, people are we're in a very bad situation where, unfortunately, shit is, if there is at some point, and I'm not saying it's tomorrow or in a year, we don't know. That's the thing. Like people, like originally when, for example, the Communist Manifesto was written or published in 1848, Marx and Engels thought that, capitalism was going to end soon. They thought it was, the end of it was right around the corner. And yet it's been more than 100 years and we're still here. We're still waiting for it to end. So it's not, it's not, there's not a strict timeline when it's going to happen. And whilst I hope that it is going to be the least violent as possible, I think that if it is going to be, if there's going to be no violence, highly doubt it. I think it's I think it's impossible. I think that even the most kind-hearted people with the best of intentions, we are eventually going to be led to have to do violence, even if it's at the lowest, the smallest scale. Violence is going to happen in some way. Is it going to be murdering thousands? I don't know. Is there going to be a bunch of people that are going to get bunched and hurt? Possibly. Yeah, probably. That's the most likely thing. How is it going to end? Is the revolution or the revolutions or whatever you want to call it going to be successful? We also don't know. Of course, in some ways you can question, is a revolution worth it if there is no, if it's not successful? In some way you could say yes, because all right, you did a revolution, a lot of people got hurt and nothing good came from it. That's a failure. That made all the violence a pointless act. But if you never try, you'll never achieve it. So it's like you're always going to lose something. But you just hope that what you're going to win from it is a much bigger deal than what you had before. I think that, to end it off, a good example, which we've talked about before, and maybe it's a more recent situation where this violent aspect is clear, is what we've talked about before going on in Palestine, which is that, for example, Hamas would not have existed if violence wasn't necessary. Do we condone their acts? No. Are they doing unnecessary shit? Yes. It's the exact same thing as any other revolution. There's always going to be people who do questionable shit. But is
Okay.
the existence of Hamas purely justified by, Palestinians just wanted to be violent, they just wanted to be a bunch of assholes? No, there's a clear cause and effect. They were oppressed for 75 years and still ongoing. And eventually they exhausted all means of doing shit peacefully. And at some point there was going to be somebody which had some violent tendencies, which showed there's hope for us, and it's to strike back. And that's how stuff like Hamas is born.
Might I give my small unimportant opinion?
Sure, go ahead. I won't call it unimportant, but yes, go ahead.
I actually had this. I talked about this with my grandmother, who knows a lot more about politics than I do, and she lived through a revolution, and it was because me and Red were talking about it in private before Red started writing the blog, and so I kind of presented my opinion, and it's basically that a revolution can only be justified if its consequences are still better than those that come from inaction.
I mean, yeah, like if you're gonna put it, sorry for interrupting you, if a revolution is in the, is to oppose a right wing dictatorship, that's a bad revolution, man. That's not a good thing, because the afterwards, the aftermath is going to be worse than it was before.
And even then, even if you lose something in the revolution, if the revolution costs more than what inaction would, then it's not worth it in my eye. If for you to have a revolution, you need to nuke a fucking city
Yeah.
and kill hundreds of thousands of civilians to destroy capitalism, I will bet on reform. And I wanted to say a little something about Hamas and Palestine,
Yeah.
which is that I personally do not and will never agree with the violent methods of terrorist organizations. And I do understand that the Palestinian situation, revolution, and armed revolution might be one of the only ways that they can leave their current horrible lives, but never in any situation, in any shape or form, is war with terror and atrocities justified. At the end of the day, every single person that is affected by a revolution or a current system is exactly that. It's a person. It's an infinite quantity. It's not a number. You cannot judge individuals by the number of individuals that are lost on a war, on a conflict. If someone dies, it's as much as a tragedy as 1,000 people dying.
Yeah. I think that the important thing to keep in mind, and I'll do my conclusion after this, which is that like the situation in Palestine, right? Like you were like you put it in the words of a revolution, and in some ways I can agree. The unfortunate issue, I guess, with the Israel Palestine issue, or conflict, whatever you want to call it, is that it is clear that Palestine is never going to win. Unfortunately, the odds are completely against them, and the entire world is against them. And as much
I
as I
mean,
would love,
currently, I want to stop you right there because there's a war brewing in the fucking Middle East. Did you know that prediction that every single sci-fi story makes that
yeah,
the Middle East is going to be a radioactive desert?
yeah,
Yeah, we're going to see that becoming. That might become a reality.
yeah, no, but like I think you understand what I mean. That like no matter how much they like the worst, the least worst case scenario, right? The best thing that could come like the okay, let's put it in this way. What do I think should happen into resulting the conflict between Israel and Palestine? Ideally, which is in many ways also violent, is that they literally just go, all right, all these Jewish Israelis or whatever, like these Zionists, whatever you want to call them, they do not belong here. Like Zionism is not a valid concept. Like they need to be brought back to their actual homeland, which is the US, Europe, whatever, kind of doing the opposite of what happened originally. Is that going to happen? Fuck no, that's not going to happen. There's
I
absolutely
mean,
no
I am
way.
in full support of the. I don't think that's the best option. I think the best option would be the one presented by the European. Wait, the United Nations. That's it. The European Union. Goddamn, the United Nations, which is that the land should be split 50-50. At the end of the day, there are Israeli people that have their lives and probably have done nothing wrong and might even be against the occupation of Palestine, and there are the assholes. And either way, there should be brokered a peace that tries to balance it out for both sides.
The only issue, quote unquote, it's not an issue that I have with that idea, is that that is really optimistic in the sense
Also
that
declined, but yeah, it is the best possible option.
I think I don't. Okay, there's differences, right? There is the right solution, which is what does Israel deserve? They deserve to not exist. They have enacted violence on these people
If you
for
could go back in
so many
time,
years.
good old days.
What they deserve is to dissolve, or whatever you want to say, Israel, turn it back into Palestine, and you basically give a free visa card to all the inhabitants of Israel and go, okay, you can live wherever. Okay, is that going to happen? Of course not. That's not going to happen. There's no way that Israel is going to let that happen. Then there's the, let's say the 50-50 thing. Is even Israel themselves going to want that to happen? Probably not. Even they themselves right now don't want that to happen. Are going to Palestinians be okay with that? We don't know. Maybe. It's not something that we know right now. Then there's maybe one of the other worst solution, which is that currently they stop the war. Israel is just Israel. They stop terrorizing the Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip becomes the new Israel. Like that is sorry, not the new Israel, the new Palestine. Like that is literally, like Gaza Strip is all what Palestine will be from now on. Is that a good solution? No. Like that is also a bad solution because Palestinians are not going to like that. And then the worst possible idea is that Israel just fully genocides and wipes out all Palestinians on the face of the earth, which is that is the worst thing that can happen. That is a horrible idea. So can I go, hey, we need to do this one thing? No, in fact, I don't even want to give a solution because I don't think no matter what solution happens, nobody's going to be happy. Nobody. It is going to be a massive compromise for everybody. And what is going to be the end solution? I don't know, nor do I really want to comment on it because it's not my place. Regardless, back to the conclusion. Sorry, a bit of a tangent I went on. The conclusion I wanted to go on, which is kind of in going on with what you said, which is that something very important to realize is that violent revolution, first of all, when you are the oppressed group that is going to start is going to start a violent revolution in reaction to violence towards you, there's a bit of rules that need to be established. One is you have exhausted, and I truly emphasize the word exhausted, every possible peaceful way to achieve your goals. Every single one. You have been on the street every day for hours. You've done every feasible thing that could come up to your little brain. Everything. And there truly is no other option. It is only then that even considering going to violence becomes slightly okay. And then there's something that is very important, which is one of my biggest critiques that I've said before about the Chinese Revolution, is that for the love of God, don't start doing shit for the sake of doing shit. Don't start murdering people as fear tactics, as causing terror.
Terrorism.
Does that make you as bad as the oppressor? I don't know. Saying yes or no is not really. I don't know if it doesn't make you good. Does that make you as bad? I don't know. It's not a mathematic equation. It's not as easy as this.
Moment where that line blurs is the moment when you know you've done fucked up.
So when shit starts getting blurry, you're like, all right, you're doing something wrong. So there needs to be clear. You can't just start let's just start blowing shit up. Let's start doing terrorism. Terrorism is very hard to justify because it's a very blurry line, because you might have the best of intentions, but if you're terrorizing people, it starts getting questionable. So there's a lot of moral implications in a violent revolution. And is it going to be a fully moral situation where everybody's happy, and even the people doing the violent revolution, are they going to be proud of themselves? Maybe not. Probably not. They're probably going to do a lot of things that they despised or sickened of their actions. Does that make the revolution not okay? I don't know. That's when it comes to what Alpha said. Then it depends on the aftermath. It depends on what the revolution ends up creating. Does it create a amazing socialist country that eventually evolves into a almost utopian commune, where people have given up money and people truly live in an egalitarian society where we have left behind the constructs of sexuality and gender and if that's what the revolution leads to, then sure, yeah, that's amazing. Holy shit, that's the dream. Do we know that that's what's a violent social revolution is going to lead to? We don't know. And that's where shit gets blurry. And I wish that I could go, I wish I had a clear answer to be like, oh, this is how it is. This is the perfect answer. No, there is no perfect answer, unfortunately, because there's always a painful, concept to, as I hate violence. I couldn't, even if my worst enemy was being the most annoying person to me, and they, started and they made me want to act on violence, I still wouldn't choose to do so, because I'm like, what would this is just going to escalate into something bigger, and it's just going to be a whole waste of time. And these are things that I think about regularly. So do I like saying that is a proletarian revolution going to be inherently violent? Do I like to say that it is? No, I fucking hate it. I hate it so much. I don't like it at all. But I also need to recognize how class struggle works, and I need to recognize how these things work. And as much as I hate it, I also need to recognize that that would happen. It's not a happy ending. It really isn't. I don't know. What do you think of it, Alpha?
I think that I have become disease, the destroyer of my immune system.
You've become one with disease.
My body's about to make a revolution in my brain, and they're going to cook me from the inside because I am fucking sick.
Yeah, but I think that an important thing to keep in mind is that during a revolution, you cannot lose track of your goals. You cannot lose track of what your true achievements are. And during like a revolution, it needs to be very well, like almost planned in a way. Like you can't just, it can't be like the how we talked about last week, which is like the American like militia type of vibe, which is like just a bunch of people start grabbing a bunch of guns and just start shooting. Like no, there needs to be a sorry, there needs to be like a clear goal. And in many ways, the Bolsheviks did that very well. They clearly had a goal. They went there. They did it. And then during the first few years of where the Bolsheviks were the ones who were the leaders of Russia. For example, they legalized abortion. They made divorce a relatively easy thing. They legalized the homosexual or uncriminalized homosexuality. They did a bunch of cool stuff. Then during, like, for example, when Stalin came in, did he fuck all that up? Yes, he fucked it all up. It's always the guys with the fucking funny mustaches that always fuck up everything. I don't know what's up with the mustaches, but it affects their brains, man. That's my conspiracy theory. Mustaches are evil.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
That is a bit of my conclusion, is that there is not much of a satisfactory conclusion to this answer, but I
It is literally a field of academics. How could we come up with an answer?
no, yeah, I mean that's true, but I at least, like, the reason I wanted to write this article is because I myself had this question. I hate violence. I hate the idea of having to act upon violence, and it's something that I in a way pride myself on, into not having those violent tendencies or whatever. And being kind of met with the when I was researching stuff, and kind of being met with like the sudden realization of like, is my like peaceful non-violent ideas, technically speaking, like not possible? Like, is my ideology, does it go against, like, does it have a conflict on like my anti-violence ideas? And I in a way I wanted to answer it. Did I come up with a clear answer? No, but at least I had like an answer, or I at least I can analyze the issue at hand and come up to a realization that, okay, maybe it's not a yes or a no, but there's implications to it. Whilst and regardless of what it means, is that you can still be against the violence, and it doesn't essentially go against the ideas of Marxism and establishing violence, establishing violence, establishing a socialist society. Because in a way, I guess, if you aren't against violence, if you are very pro-violence, I don't know what that would exactly be. I think that in a way that is like how you then kind of turn into like the idea of just starting doing reckless shit. So I think that not having a mentality of like, we're doing this violence for the sake of it, but like, I hate that I'm doing this, but I need to protect my people or whatever. I think that's the best of the worst case scenarios, right? It's the choosing between two evils, and one of them is slightly less evil, but if it goes well, the outcome could be something very positive. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to support us over on Patreon. Of course, as I said before, if you can support us over on Patreon, check out our website on how you can help us. Currently, we're looking for people who can help us, turn our several podcasts into short content like TikToks or like Reels or YouTube Shorts. We're also, looking for people that can help us over on the main channel on doing more like scripted content, which I think would be really fun, both for us and for the viewers. So we're looking for people like that, and in the future, we're going to be looking for other people that can help us, even in the smallest ways possible. And of course, join our Discord. We always enjoy being able to talk to the people that enjoy our content. And yeah, and also check out our social platforms where we keep everybody updated on the newest stuff and where you can also interact with us and, talk to us. So anything you want to say, Alpha, or have you, as the illness overtaken you?
Well, it's complicated, so please do not, as always, take our word as the only direction and source for your own opinion.
Yeah.
Indulge yourself in the blessing that is research.
Yeah. Come up with your own answers.
And then tell us why you think we are right or wrong.
Yeah. And have a healthy debate rather than you're wrong.
We understand
Ugh.
in crying. With that being said, thank you everyone for listening. I'm gonna go into a coma and
You're
sleep
gonna
for
go into a
9
coma for up until the next recording. You're just gonna disappear off the face of the earth, and then I'm gonna have to
right.
like
I wish
wake him up from his hibernation.
I have so much studying to do.
Yeah, same. So, uh,
Yeah, that's basically it.
see you guys all next week. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.